But the nice thing about back then is you're doing it yourself. You did have a Home Depot and a Lowe's. Oh wait, no, you had to go to the lumber yard and get lumber, and the power tools were you flexing. That's about all the power you're gonna get. It's a crazy thing, So so there they were, building their house, and how do they do that? It's like it's crazy, and the house is there, and then my grandma grew up. That was her start, and they would ride around on horses. Even before that, I think she was on an Indian ranch or something. She was enough Indian to where she'd ride on the back of a horse, and they would shoot off the back of the horse. I think when she was under 10 years old, it was just something to do, and so there, that was her beginning. And now she has an iPhone, and she's the smartphone, and she's utilizing that thing. So for her to totally, I guess for somebody to understand her is a tall order, and vice versa. My other grandma, the one in Europe, she grew up, like I think I've said before, looking at our skylight, seeing what looked like birds, to watch the German paratroopers land in her city of Rotterdam, or Berserook, and by Rotterdam in Holland, that bordered Germany. And now these Germans are in her town, and now she's arguing with them, and some were picking up on her. Hey, here's a young girl. And she would point at them, even because there was German and Dutch, a little bit of a difference in language, though they knew, like us kind of knowing Spanish, you could still kind of wing it. And she explained to them, see that boat burning in the North Sea right there? You did that. And, that is you. When I look at you, I see Dutch ships burning, and so good luck with that one. And it's a pretty tough thing for a lady to do, riding bike, in the Second World War, especially against the German army that, they felt like, hey, they were the chosen ones, essentially, So anyway, so we're trying to have these people, that you and I, this is who raised us. This is the stories we heard, and it wasn't some book that was written 1,000 years ago. This is 70, 80 years ago, and next to a diesel right now. It's sounds like a UPS truck, but it's a Dodge, and then they put the stupid chips in there, and everything's great, cool until they boost the horsepower so much in those things, they blow all the stock trannies, the seals. So I never got it, because these trucks are made to pull a house to begin with. So anyway, so my grandma Tracy, this was the one in Utah. She would tell, we were driving, I was there last year in Utah, and she was just driving around, and we were by an Air Force base, and she told me, she goes, yeah, I remember being here one time, and there was POWs here. I think they're Italians. I'm like, what were they here for? They're at the pharmacy. And she goes, oh, it's because they needed shaving stuff. I'm like, what do you mean? She's all, yeah, at the Air Force Base, I think it was Hill Air Force Base, they would grab the POWs, take them to the store so they can get kits to shave. I'm thinking, America, they say what you want about America, but compare what we were doing to what everybody else was doing in the 30s and 40s, that's crazy. We hear all this horrible stuff that we did, but, that's not a bad thing to be doing, back then. So I think we're ahead of the ball, and even better now, probably even too good now. So anyway, I am trying to bridge the gap of, okay, here, these are my influences. These are the people that I know and love and have taught me how to be a person. And I think that's one of the reasons why I have no problem working. I mean, literally, when I die, there's going to be a tool in my hand, and I'm trying to figure out, okay, how can I do this? And while I'm doing it, I'm just going to kill over and die. Hopefully when I'm in my 80s, 87. It's because of that work ethic. You just do it. I would rather die than to be called lazy. And now I got the crowd now that would rather die than to not be lazy. So it's a weird thing. We're going back and forth. So it's if we could bridge that gap somehow and find a sweet spot. But I do think it takes a smart or a wise person to reach, I don't want to say down, but across the board to this younger generation coming up. And then it takes a wise kid to learn from experience. Like I said, I should have learned for other people's experience. I would have had a probably bigger bank account and less broken bones. But at least I learned it now instead of later. So you have these two things coming together, and it with your kids too. Instead of driving yourself crazy trying to get kids to come around to your point of view, I think later on, and I really am thinking about the parent that's just afraid to raise their kids. That's a horrible thing. But at the same time, if you come in there too hellfire and brimstone, that has not worked out for me. My 17-year-old, he's my stepson, and I figure, okay, I'll come in there, I'll teach him how to work his ass off, and I'll punish him if he's lazy and bad, and he'll change. And it didn't work out, and now he resents me. There's other stuff going on too, I'm sure, as to why he resents me, that I wish he had the character to overcome. But and I wish I had different things in my character too. But the point is, it didn't work out, and right now it's not working out for him. Hopefully it will later on. Because I'm not doing it for my legacy as much as I would love to be praised. Like, oh yeah, Pops Brent Rolex. Boy, he really turned up the heat, and look at the result. And because ultimately they're doing the work. The person that's pointing the way. You're not much more valuable than a street sign. To be honest with you. If the street sign wasn't there, sure, people would blow right past it, go off the cliff, but you're there. The least you could do is warn people what's coming. But I think it's a horrible thing if you don't try to raise people right. But if you do, again, you're not doing the work. You're just pointing the way. So, there's, you got the thing to where if kids are being told, hey, do this because this will work better. And I think if we keep telling them too much, then the kids and everybody gets gun shy. They can't really do anything like they would do it. And it's the helicopter parenting. So now that a kid was, okay, you can't do this, you can't do that. I think oh shoot, they just came out in Honolulu. They said you cannot use your cell phones when you're in the crosswalk, and that's the government thinking everything through, right? Everything that would hurt you, we're going to step in and we're going to stop it. And we do that so much, like the government does that so much, that eventually people are like, well, the government's telling me not to do it, so it must be okay. I think if we got to the point where we said, hey, it's your own responsibility, buyer beware, look out, I think we'd be a lot safer in the end because we would be looking out. But now we're just kind of going and we're letting the government be the guide rails. And I don't think that's a good thing ultimately for a country. I mean, sure, codes are great. Every time I come back from Mexico, I kiss the ground because we have codes. But I think we have to decide, okay, are we a good enough country to where we can let people do some of the things and then the government can do the other things? Or do we feel like the government has to do everything? And, anytime that I was telling a story today about when I was 13, I used to wash trucks. And my dad would send me to the truck yard, ride my bike there, wash trucks. And then sometimes we have to pull the trucks around. And these weren't just like a truck and trailer. It was like a truck with a dump on it, dump truck, and then a tongue that swiveled. It says trailer, essentially. And then a trailer behind that. So so we're out there, and you have to build up the brake pressure above, I think it was 110 PSIs before it'll stop. I'm 13 years old. And if I was to drive and I didn't have the PSIs above 110, there used to be a Billiards across the street from where I used to wash trucks. 80,000, or not 80,000 pound, 80 ton truck would wind up in the middle of the Billiards, the pool hall, because the truck wouldn't stop. And, the 80 ton would probably be loaded with dirt. Sometimes they would be loaded with dirt because the last job would cancel. Or 3 o'clock and everybody went home. Nobody stays late. Although back then they may have, but now it's 3 o'clock, they're done. Or 3:30 with lunch. So anyway, I only had to be told once, and I can remember it today. The PSI has to be up. And the reason why is because I knew there was no buffer zone between me and that pool hall across the street. I was the one that had to wait and then apply the brakes with enough pressure, otherwise it wouldn't stop. And I think now when we follow our kids around and stop, the kids are wired to, for one, playing all these video games. It's already screwing up their wiring. I heard, and if somebody ever listens to this podcast 20 years from now, they'll say, wow, who was his science teacher? But I think your brain, it's making shortcuts in how it's evolving. And then now you got us on the sideline saying, don't do this, don't do that. And so they're like, hey, I got, it'd be like my dad saying, okay, when you're having 110 PSI, then you can apply the brake. But just for safe measure, I'm going to keep my foot on the brake too. Guess what? While mid-sentence, I would be dozing off, tuning the radio to listening to, I don't know, whatever new Cure song was coming out at the time. And I'll say U2 for nostalgia. That way I sound cooler. So half of it is our fault, and or at least it's not the kids' fault. Not that blame matters, but we need to understand that it's not a choice they're making to be the way they are. They are the way they are because of what's happened to them, what's happening around them. So we're the adults. We need to step in, and we need to be the wise ones, lead by example, and then eventually say, all right, guys, you're on your own. By the way, I think if OSHA met my dad right now and heard all the stories, I think he'd go to jail.